here in Charleston. Good place for it, Hurricane Alley here. And we contacted them probably several months ago and asked to come visit them. And they said, well, after 9/11, that doesn't happen. But they came to see us. And this is Ron Morales. He's with NOAA. He's here to talk to us about aviation weather.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you. Morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Morning.
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 Can you hear me okay without the microphone? Because I hate microphones.
Yeah.
You okay, or do you need me to? It sounds like an offense.
Test. Okay. All right, good morning. Actually, our weather office is not too far down the road, right by the control tower at the airport. We're like just a few hundred feet away from that. And if you ever do want a tour, we can take you at our office. I'm not sure who you said they wouldn't let you in, but.
I think the group is too big or something.
Oh, yeah, it is a big group, but if you're ever at the local area, or there's, as I'll show you in a minute, there's a fairly educated group on that, I would think, but maybe not.
Or you get paid whether you're wrong or correct. Right?
Yeah, that's such an old joke. Thanks for reminding me. So we'll do that. We'll look at, I think, some of the weather phenomena that affect you as pilots, I think, and then how to stay a little bit. Our organization is federal government under the Department of Commerce. Probably nobody knows that. You probably have heard of NOAA, which we are a lot of times just generically referred to as NOAA, but we are really one of the 6 offices under NOAA and the only one that does weather.
Thank you, Microsoft.
Yeah. So funding has to go that way too, and we're not doing too well. We're very, very understaffed and very underfunded, and that's been the case for several years now, and it's actually getting much worse. Our mission is pretty simple, boiled down to the red letters there: protection of life and property. So we have a very, very important mission. Yes, even though we're maybe wrong in your perception more than we're right, but actually that's not necessarily true. And it's all about perception and all about how you're gauging right and wrong and how right you want us to be and all that kind of stuff. It's a very, very difficult science, so it's hard to get it. It'll never be perfect, ever. At least through the rest of my lifetime, I can't imagine. I don't think ever. It's just not possible mathematically and scientifically to ever have. We have moved into more probabilistic stuff. Instead of just saying it's going to be, today's going to be, especially for hurricanes and winter storms, saying hurricane it is going to hit in Wilmington or it is going to hit in the Outer Banks. We have errors, right, and cones there of the uncertainty. So if you go to weather.gov on the web, just type that in, you'll get a jigsaw puzzle that looks like, whoa, jigsaw puzzle that looks like that, and each one of those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle are the different areas of responsibility of each National Weather Service field office, like I'm in, not a center like the National Hurricane Center. That is part of the National Weather Service, but they're a center, and they deal with a big area. I'll zoom in on ours in a minute. We're down here, and we have Southeast South Carolina and Southeast Georgia. There's 122 of these offices, including Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Guam. So our Puerto Rico office got absolutely hammered for Maria. The Doppler radar got annihilated. There's a zoom in on our area. We have 8 counties in South Carolina and 12 in Georgia. We also have responsibility out over the Atlantic waters that you see shaded there. There's approximately 2 million people in this area. I think maybe even more than that. It's growing by 5 families a day in Charleston. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the southeast, actually probably east of the Mississippi. And we are now the biggest city in South Carolina, bigger than Columbia. So a lot going on here, and as you can tell, it's a beautiful view out here. Beautiful view now, but this is a very, very vulnerable area for coastal flooding and for sea level rise issues. Our radar is located in Jasper, right here, about 75 miles southwest of our office, which is up here. So when that breaks, that's a problem. We got to get techs to go out and look at that. And so it's not like a lot of times, a lot of those 122 offices, the radar is kind of right next to their office, so they can, if it breaks or it needs maintenance, it's not a long trip. So this is a big issue for us. And for me to do any sort of outreach and education, you can see that it's a car ride for me to just get about anywhere except for Charleston. And in fact, I almost didn't get here today. Thankfully, Google showed me that all roads were blocked to get here. So it took me around all kinds of weird directions that I was thinking I was going to have to make a call and say I wasn't going to make it. So just getting around here, you guys are not from here, right? Just visiting. So if you've been here any length of time for more than a couple of days, you will know what I'm talking about with the traffic. It's quite horrendous. And the radar is located there so that it can equally sweep out the area that we need to watch. And of course, we're coordinating with all of our surrounding offices and centers as well. And during hurricanes, we're coordinating directly with the National Hurricane Center. We have a big, what looks like a giant iPad. We just got it this year. It takes the place of a regular phone so that we can see each other and all the other offices that are coordinating. It's virtual, and it's pretty cool. But really, we just need to hear each other. Don't really need to see each other's faces, but it's nice. Our staff is supposed to be 22. We probably will never be 22 again. We've been down 3 for a few years. We've had one position vacant for 4 years, over 4 years now. We're about to go down another person. We just don't hire fast enough and don't have the money to hire and fill in. I can't impress upon you how difficult that is. And I know everybody in the world deals with shortages, and everyone's doing 5 jobs. You know, that used to be 5 different people, now one person is doing that. But for us, we're 24/7 rotating shifts, always on the clock. During, say, Florence, we're 12-hour shifts. Pretty much we don't go home. We sometimes have to sleep at the office, and there's no showers, no bedding, no anything like that. So can be pretty rough. The core folks that are there day and night are the the forecasters. We have supposed to have 5 senior forecasters and 5 kind of journey forecasters, we call them, or general forecasters. We haven't had this observation program leader for over 4 years, and we're about to go down to 1 intern in a few weeks. So I'm doing these duties as well as part of management. My position is warning coordination meteorologist, but myself and the science officer are now somewhere between 40 to 60% operational shifts. It's supposed to be no more than 20. So you can imagine it's tough to, the only reason I'm here today is that I got an invitation a while ago before I could put it out on my schedule, and but it easily could have been canceled. So it's just really hard now to get out and do what I'm supposed to be doing. That's it's not very big. So the whole operations floor is probably about the size of this room, maybe a little bit smaller. And we have screens up on one wall. We call our situational awareness screens, where we can view the Savannah TV markets, the Charleston TV markets, and any sort of weather data that we need to look at. And these are all of our workstations that we work at, and they're totally contained. So you have everything that you need to do there, from PCs and internet and chat and social media to our general workstations, our Linux-based workstations that are kind of locked down to the outside world. And that's where we do all of our weather stuff. So we produce, I'm sure you guys are aware of TAPs, right? Those are produced by us, by the local offices around the country. The Air Force produces, the military has theirs as well. They're slightly different. They're actually a little bit more detailed, and they have, ours are kind of more rounded out, and the numbers for cloud heights and stuff, they can have really strange numbers and strange visibilities that we don't get into that type of detail. But a lot of times the Air Force, the Joint Base here, Joint Base Charleston, which is also on the airport with us and is also where Boeing is, a lot of times they're using our TAFs and then tweaking ours to fit into their military stuff. And we produce them for 2 sites right now, the Charleston Airport and Savannah Airports. Charleston is getting, actually Savannah as well, they're both getting progressively more and more busy. Savannah is actually called Savannah Hilton Head because it serves a lot of the folks going in and out of Hilton Head. Hilton Head does have its own airport, but it's not very big. So Savannah kind of serves a lot of that traffic as well, both international airports. And Charleston just had a whole remodel a few years ago, so the terminal's pretty nice. We routinely update these forecasts. In other words, they're required to be updated every 6 hours, but we will update them whenever, which sometimes can be constantly. Aviation forecasting is something that you don't learn anywhere in school, when you go for meteorology. It's something that you generally learn on your own and during operations. We'll look at a little bit of maybe some of the difficulties of aviation forecasting, but if you think about the forecast is valid, you guys know that it's really only valid for a 5 nautical mile perimeter around the airport. That's it. It's not a flight path forecast, okay? It's not that. Those are tweebs. We used to do those. We don't do them anymore. Actually, some parts of the country might still do those route forecasts, but you're pretty much on your own, I would think, especially as general aviation, to say, well, I'm leaving from Charleston and I'm flying to Greenville, Spartanburg or something, and you're looking at those 2 TAF sites, and maybe you're looking at weather in between and whatever else. I mean, it really depends on your sophistication and how much you want to get into it. But they're only valid for the perimeter of 5 nautical miles around the airport. And they're valid, we do them for 24-hour periods. And then every 6 hours, we push out the 24-hour period a little bit more. Some airports around the country, like New York City and Chicago, Boston, and then probably Philly, name a few in the Northeast and North, are 36-hour forecasts. We haven't done that yet here. And I wanted to stress too that the METAR, or the surface observation that you see at most airports, that is not a forecast, that's the current condition. And I know that might sound silly to you all, but we get that confused a lot, and we get it confused in questions a lot. What's the current forecast? And a lot of times they mean the current conditions, what is actually going on right now, versus what is going to happen in the future. That's very different. When we're doing warnings, I wanted to show you, wind-related warnings like tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, which we issue a lot of. And out over the water, we issue something called a special marine warning. And we'll draw a polygon or a box shape around the area of concern, and then that gets produced into a text that can go to your phone, can go to the TV, can go to NOAA Weather Radio, and so forth. And tornado warnings go automatically to your cell phone via the wireless emergency alert if you are in that area. Anybody ever got one on their phone? You guys are mostly from where?
All over.
Okay, you're all over. So depending on what part of the country you're in, you may have had several of these tornado warnings, flash flood warnings as well, would go on your phone automatically. This is sort of what our agency is moving toward, we think. Instead of clacking out the 7-day forecasts and the TAFs and the fire weather forecasts and marine forecasts and all that stuff in the background, we'll be going on site, but we already have and do go on site. For example, during Florence, that guy there, my counterpart, who used to be at our office, is right there next to the governor of South Carolina, saying what we think is going to happen weather-wise, which immediately and directly influences the decisions for evacuation. Now, we don't tell people to evacuate. That's not we give the information for people to make that decision. So I didn't realize it until just a few days ago, because we've already been through 3 storms in the last 2 years with this setup of being how much responsibility that is on your shoulders. Because we know we're going to over-evacuate. We did for Florence because of the uncertainty. And with that type of, exposure and visibility is going to come criticism. So, we know. We are very used to getting criticized. We also do the Heritage Golf Tournament down here in Hilton Head, going on site and being right there. We're supporting the emergency managers, not the PGA. PGA has their own meteorologists, okay? That's a very important distinction. We are not supporting the private sector. That is for the private sector weather agencies and industries to do. We can only support the state, local, federal government folks and people that are directly related to the public safety. Super Bowl, we send folks to the Super Bowl to help the emergency manager for not just the Super Bowl day, but all the activities that lead up to the Super Bowl. Like the one that was up in New York a few years ago, there's like a week long of, I've never been to a Super Bowl, but there's like a week long set of activities that go on that we're supporting and helping for weather because there's lots of people outside in harm's way. And then just some other ones that we've done. Okay, any questions before I move into the next section? Okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
When you say thunderstorms in the vicinity of an airport,
Yeah.
how far away is the vicinity?
That's supposed to be within 5 miles. Now, what's observed, so what we're forecasting versus what you see on the METAR, the observation, is, let's say some of the observations are not very good. And sometimes it's thundering like crazy and they don't even put thunder in the observation, or vice versa, which is a major impact to not only you as aviation, but to us as forecasters and for our verification. So if, for example, we had thunder in our TAF, but the observer is not reporting the thunder, we get an X, and vice versa. So everything is kind of within that 5 mile ring around, 5 nautical mile ring around whatever site, or whatever airport the TAF is for.
Are you collecting the information from that airport?
Yes, we're looking directly at the METAR always. In fact, aviation forecasting can sometimes, well, a lot of times, be chasing your tail, where you're looking at the observation going, gee, my forecast is not matching up very well with this, and you start updating, and you get caught because you don't have time to really analyze the situation, and before you know it, you're just chasing the observation, and the TAF becomes more of an observation than a forecast. So we're in categories like IFR, VFR, MVFR. We're trying to forecast in those categories. So we're not going to nail. We're not supposed to be worried about every little directional change. It's certain directional changes, like 30 degrees or more, and it's 12 knots or more. And, when you're changing flight categories, so whether you go from 2,000 to 1,500 feet is the same flight category. So we don't technically have to update that forecast, but some forecasters will, just to try to get it perfect.
How much of this happens automatically and how much relies on you as an individual to do it?
As far as the updates, you mean? Or?
Yeah.
It's all manual. It's all a human being, so it's very labor intensive. And years ago, we used to have aviation forecasters that could dedicate their time, especially if you've got more sites like New York City and Boston. They have, more than 10 airports that they're taking care of. But now it's one person doing everything. It's one person doing marine forecasting, public forecasting, fire weather forecasting, aviation, warning, everything. You can imagine, well, maybe you can't, but that's not the ideal way to do it. And aviation forecasting, in my opinion, next to fire weather, are two of the most difficult forecasts to make and to get right. And some guys and girls are really good at it. And usually you just have to do it a lot. And you have to be a great observer, and you have to learn from your mistakes in any science, particularly ours, yeah.
So in the communication of these forecasts, why haven't we moved to more of a plain English type of format in this day and age?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've actually had nobody ask that. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
I understand 50 years ago, every bit, every byte mattered.
Well, that's
now.
right. And that's a lot of what we're still constrained under, believe it or not, like all capital letters in our products. And you would be amazed the conniptions that we're going through to uncapitalize everything. I mean, we're just floored at how problematic that is. So some of it's left over from that. There used to be like, I don't know if because we don't brief anymore. So if you went to an aviation brief, or you're going to make a flight and you go get a briefing, they would put it, they would talk to you, right, in plain language. FAA should do that as well if they're still doing that, but I don't know if they are.
No.
The FAA will still, you can still go and get a briefing, right?
You can.
But why that isn't, like, I guess give me an example of how you, just actually writing it out in English is how
Well,
you
I mean,
want to see it?
For instance, when you're going through your instrument training or when you're going through pilot training and you're learning to read weather, you have to memorize 30 or 35 different codes for rain, severe rain, hail, embedded thunderstorms, and because it's condensed down to 2 letters.
Yeah.
For those things, that's ridiculous, right? We ought to just have the word in the forecast for those things, because what we're trying to do as pilots planning a mission is we're trying to maximize safety, reduce workload, and after 50 years, this is an unnecessary sort of extra workload in reading these things. And certain applications like ForeFlight do that translation for you, but at the core, there's something that needs to be updated.
Yeah, and I think, so what you're getting at is what we suffer from all the time. We are always trying to learn everyone else's language. So that's a language, the TAF is a language, right? Surface observations are languages that we had to learn as well. We learn emergency management language. We learn the language of our partners and customers, their decision points. So this is very good. I've never heard of anybody talking about it becoming plain language, but I can certainly push it up the chain and start the conversation.
I think we'd all vote for that.
Yeah,
Sure.
Every day, you know, you read, it's hard to believe it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If you go on the
Well-
AOA site for weather, you've got 2 options. You can take the abbreviated version, or you can take plain English. You can just click on which, and you get fully
Well-
plain English if you want.
Somebody's translating that, or
Somebody's doing it, yeah.
But if you're looking at a
I don't want it,
TAF,
'cause I
You
know
still
what
have to
the
look,
it's on the
translation
fly.
is.
yeah.
It's there.
yeah. So private sector, for example, that would be a perfect niche for a private sector meteorology forecasting agency or company to say, do exactly what you just said and take that TAF and go, I'm gonna translate that for you, or even brief you directly. I don't know.
But sometimes I'm in flight and
Yeah.
I'm busy, and the whatever outlet where I'm getting this weather in the cockpit, sometimes it's that original coded text.
Yeah.
And that is one more thing that I have to deal with. And I got to admit, sometimes I miss the content because I don't have all those codes, memorized.
Well, and like you said, the military it's really hard to read. And I mean, even the PIREPs, it's T3 or TB, and I know you guys don't really do that, but it's something that,
I agree with you. I don't even know the national stuff because I don't have to deal with it, but you're basically explaining the frustration of our world, which is many languages, many disciplines that they throw at us to learn, and you have to learn it quickly. In fact, like a brief at our national, one of our centers in the Virginia area, I was going to apply for a job there to brief at a national level, and they talked me out of it and said, you're going to have to learn 35 airports across the country like the back of your hand. You'll have to know every flight restriction and every airport minimum and all that kind of stuff. And then, I've got to talk the language of you all. We never, even though that is forcing a language on you, that wasn't us that made that. Somebody, I don't know who made that. I have no idea where that came from, to be honest with you. So we had to learn it just like you did. But I can push that up. That's, I don't have an answer why that can't be done other than rules, regulations, and all that. I mean, in government,
Inertia.
Nothing
happens fast.
Well,
Yeah.
One of the things that would probably make your job easier and make us a lot happier, as Dave said, in normal English language, the voice recognition. Are you guys doing any research into where the briefer or the forecaster is actually speaking and it's being typed into a text format based on you speaking voice recognition?
The technology's there to do that, but the way our systems are locked down, that's not easy, but it was considered when I broke my wrist a few months ago. I couldn't type very well, so, there was my boss had asked, do you want me to set up some sort of thing? And I could, to a PC, we can do that, but to our other main system where we produce a lot of the stuff, that capability is not available that I know of. but the technology is certainly there.
Because it's too old and.
No, it's just that it's different and it's so locked down with security and
Oh, okay.
that you just can't like throw a software on there to do something like you can on a PC or a Mac. It's hard to explain. Everything, if you've ever been in the government or the military, even similar, everything is very locked down and controlled. You just can't change things, unfortunately, which frustrates especially the newer generation of the Weather Service, where they're used to technology and they're used to getting their way. When I came in, somebody told me to empty a trash, and I emptied the trash. With 7 years of college and a master's degree, I did what I was told. Nowadays, they go, nah, I don't think so. And it's just a different, and I kind of admire that in a way that they balance life and work differently than our generation or my generation did or has. But that's a good suggestion, and I'll certainly push it up and start the conversation. You may be 80 years old by the time it gets through, but we can start it now, right? Any other questions? I'm perfectly happy to just answer questions and not, we can just wing this. Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point about briefings. And this is something that when I say the old days of general aviation, I'm talking only 20, 25 years ago. We were required to use DUAs, we were required to use a login with credentials, and that was we had a legal briefing at that point. So that heaven forbid anything happened, the FAA could come back and say, okay, he got a legal briefing. Now, in this day and age, with so many different points of information and so many different ways to get it, what constitutes a legal briefing?
Yeah.
Is it going to port plane and taking a look? Is it going
No
to
idea, because that's beyond, we're providing the guy out of that business. So I've always thought that myself, like, are pilots just taking off without any briefing? Probably. I don't know. I mean, I just don't, I'd love to be in your shoes, by the way. I mean, that's my dream, someday be a pilot, but I would imagine, you hear the, like I think of the JFK Jr. story where, what kind of briefing did he really get and what were his skills, when he actually got into the cockpit and tried to fly. So I honestly don't know why there aren't more crashes every day, than there are. Some of the things I've heard, and no offense to the pilot world, but when I hear somebody say, they don't care about it or they don't need to know about it, and I think to myself, you are flying in a fluid that is 100% dependent on the weather, and your aircraft is dependent completely on the weather. And if you don't know it, I almost feel like you want to get to the point where you know enough to be smart about making good decisions, but when you know too much, you get scared as hell. When I'm in a plane, my kids are like that, and I'm not scared to fly, but I'll have my hands like that because I know what's about to happen, and they're like, Dad, why are you all clenched up on your seat? I'm like, oh, nothing, everything's fine. So the more you get more nervous, but yeah.
Could you speak to the relative merits of like the low angle base reflectivity versus composite reflectivity as to what you're going to choose for different segments of flight and stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So composite reflectivity, I don't have a graphic to display it, but think of the radar. So the radar is always spinning. So it starts off at usually about a half a degree above what we call the horizon, or just below level. So it's not hitting trees and buildings and that kind of thing. Sometimes it still does. So it's rotating around, and it goes around. It makes one rotation, then it clicks up. Rotates around, makes another rotation, then it clicks up. And how much it clicks up depends on its strategy. We call it scan strategy. So for the composite reflectivity, or CR, it's waiting until it does all those rotations, usually about 19.5 degrees, because past that you're not really seeing anything. And then it says, what is the highest reflectivity or the highest value I saw from the bottom to the top? Doesn't tell you where it is, just tells you that what was the highest. So it's like the worst case return, if you will, from that volume, what we call a volume. Whereas the base one is telling you what the reflectivity was at a certain level, like the 0.5. So, I'm going around here, here's what I'm actually seeing at 0.5 degrees or the lowest level. Whereas composite is saying, what's the strongest return I'm seeing in that whole volume from bottom to top?
How long does it take to get from bottom?
It depends on the scan, anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes roughly to do that whole thing. Now, what the radar is doing is phenomenal. The amount of processing and data handling that it's doing is unbelievable. But nowadays, for us particularly, 4 to 6 minutes is a long time to get an answer on some of the things we need. So what we can change the radar to do another scan down low. So if we're looking for a tornado, for example, which is where we would see that, is closer down low, we can double up the scan or even triple it up before it keeps going up. So that's going to add a little bit to the time to finish, but it's going to help us look down low. Or we can look more in the mid levels or look more in the high levels, depending on what we need to do. In the old 1950s and 60s era radar, which is what this one replaced 25, 30 years ago, it was hand controlled by an operator to move it where they wanted to scan, where they wanted to hand code everything they were seeing on a piece of paper, putting it in to be digitized. Think of this now.
Yeah.
Okay. So they were off in a room to the side, dark, like a submarine, dark, because you needed to see the screen. The forecast, so those were technicians, usually from the Air Force, Navy, excuse me. The meteorologist, the degreed person, was outside that room, waited for the tech to hand them a piece of paper and said, here's what I'm seeing, I think you should warn. That was still happening when I got in, and I was just praying that I wouldn't have to go, it was ending when I got in. And I thought, how the heck can that process work? That's gotta be slow, but it worked. I mean, the way they had it down, and I think those radar operators were way better than we were for the first 10 years, because what happened was the Weather Service said, you ladies and gentlemen can no longer work the radar. It's gonna be these new meteorologists, these young whippersnappers that are just coming out of school. I thought that was the stupidest thing in the world to ever do, to ditch 20, 30 years in some senses of experience, to throw it on us. It's like giving your kid a learner's permit and said, okay, go on to the NASCAR track now. You're good. That's how.
With the government if you got common sense.
It was because I didn't do any thinking when I got in. I just got in. I wanted a job.
Do you still use the European models for forecasting?
Yeah, it's the European. So let me tell you, the European model, it's not the greatest model in the world. It got all this publicity from Sandy. It's good, but ours are good too, just in different ways. They have, in my opinion, the European model did not do a good job with Florence. Kept hooking it left and taking it down the coast and causing a lot of uncertainty and causing a lot of panic from Beaufort southward into Savannah and even down to Jacksonville. We don't get all of it because the Europeans don't give it all of it. They lock it down. I think we have to even pay for it. So you can get more on the web than we get in our internal system. We get many models. There's lots of things to look at. And it's funny that with hurricane now, it's the American and the European model, which are two models that aren't even designed to do hurricanes. But they've become good enough over the last few years that they do fairly well. One of the things we're just absolutely having almost no skill in is the intensity. How strong is the storm going to be? Even though you think we probably are not even good at the track, we are pretty good at the track. But the intensity, for example, Florence was coming toward the coast, and 3 or 4 days in advance, we thought it was going to be a major hurricane at the coast, maybe even a Category 4. Major is Category 3 and higher. We know that didn't happen, thankfully, but the messaging of saying that, oh, it's a Category 2, now Category 1, everyone went, oh, whew, yeah, great, no problem. We said, no. There's still going to be massive flooding and a lot of storm surge. So we're being even though we said it over and over again, we're being highly criticized for that message. Not just the government, but all the weather industry and media, because we depend on the media heavily. So we're briefing, constantly briefing the media, and we're briefing all the emergency managers and the state, governor, mayors, everybody. But if we can't get that message across, so we're trained as scientists and not as good communicators, so we're spending our life in the Weather Service trying to help and better our communication skills. I'm not meant to be on TV. I can be on TV, but I'm not meant to be on TV. I don't have the looks, I don't have this voice, but people like seeing us, say, someone like us on TV when hair's disheveled and my sleeves are rolled up. Looks like you're talking to some sort of person that knows what they're talking about, right? Mad scientist. That's why the Weather Channel says, we're gonna turn it over now to Dr. Nab or Dr. So-and-so, because they think that the public hears the word doctor. Well, that person obviously knows what they're talking about. So, forgot where I was going with that. Next question.
The different models, and I
Oh, the
thought there were
model.
like 3 that you kind of look at, but
I
that's what they were telling us.
I gotta tell you, we visited the Oxnard Center.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one of
You know,
the-
at 11 o'clock, they all turn on local TV to find out how they screwed up the weather report.
Well, it's very humbling to, I can't impress, anybody here an engineer? You guys and girls, if there were some, I could see, but you went through something similar to what we would go through in school through about beginning of your junior year, and then we split off into our disciplines. So the level of complexity of the sciences, I didn't know going in. Nobody told me how hard it was going to be. And then you take that and you try to condense it down to something like today, partly sunny, high 95, southwest wind 5 to 10 miles an hour. It seems almost moronic that what we're processing to turn it into something plain language. It sounds like anybody can do it, right? Anybody can, like, that's why people think, oh, you're wrong more than you're right, or hey, you get to look at and point at a nice smiley face on a map that says this is a high pressure system. That has nothing to do with what we do. That is so not what we do. That's more entertainment. That's ratings. We are about the mission of protection of life and property and getting it right. We don't make more money when we get it right. We don't get accolades. We don't get anything. We're just driven by getting it right and improving the science. So that's a whole different mindset to go to work with. Engineers are probably similar. You know, I mean, gosh, if you screw up the bridge, it falls down. I think about it every day driving to work. Every day. When you're sitting on the bridge at 200 feet and it's bouncing up and down, and all I gotta go on is the back of my mind, the guy in my office whose brother's an engineer says, they're all over engineered, don't worry. So it's so complex of a science to try to translate to everybody to make sense. Yeah, that's a good point, good question. So all the weather data, all the models, the satellites, the radars, the buoy data's out of the water. We launch a balloon at our office twice a day, weather balloon that goes up twice a day every day, at least twice a day. During Florence, it was every 6 hours to improve the forecast. All the data is essentially coming from the government, coming from, I don't want to say the National Weather Service, but NOAA and the government, we're kind of running all that. But what they want is the private industry wants us out of that and said, okay, government, I want all of that data and I want it for free. And then I want to take that data and make money off of it. You know, it's the American way. And it, you know, but where the difference comes in is right now, you and your tax dollars can get onto our website or come to our office or have me speak for your tax dollar, which is probably less than $5 a person a year to run our agency. We have a little bit, about $1 billion budget. You might say, well, $1 billion. I'm going to tell you that's chump change in the government anyway. $1 billion is far below what we need to run. It's just not enough. But we do a ton of stuff for that amount of money and the amount of people that we have. Yeah, we're wrong once in a while, but we're working very hard to minimize that and to get it right and to get the science better. The other question, somebody had another question too, I thought I saw it.
We do quite a bit of business, our involvement, we're Canadian, but we do business with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard. And I was just last week at a session up in Norfolk where they're talking about how how the funding is going, because it was a problem for the past 3 or 4 years.
Especially the Coast
The
Guard.
last administration, they got a pile of money, and that's the Coast Guard and the Navy, and I'm just wondering why your, NOAA would not have had some of that as well, been on that same train.
Yeah.
I guess not.
No. It's just all about priorities, I guess, and we are not a priority. So we're a priority when things are bad, happening bad, but most people, I think, in this country and maybe even in the world, don't value weather. They don't value the product of meteorology and what can be produced. They think of it probably as a hokey science, you know. Even though you were joking or maybe not joking, that is a common conception of any crowd that I go into. I don't hear it as much as I used to 30 years ago, but when you think about if you are thinking that in your head, even though you're not maybe malicious about it, if you're thinking that, then you're unlikely to value it. And you're certainly unlikely to push a senator or congressman or whatever to fund your National Weather Service. Until you can't get all the stuff that you're currently getting, that might raise a concern for you, depending on whether you care about weather information. So yeah, we are always struggling for resources, and we're well versed, like most, to work on nothing.
Yeah, I was just curious, within the past, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, has the models increased better accuracy of the weather, specifically like I fly a lot of times in the Midwest, and most of the time in the Midwest where there's a lot of thunderstorms in the summertime, and the convective activity can happen almost instantaneously over Kansas, Oklahoma. So have your models helped to increase our safety?
Very much so. What we call convective allowing models. So most modeling is all about what goes into, not just the engine of the model itself, kind of like a race car, but the gasoline that goes into it or the data. So that European model that everybody talks about, they have different types of gasoline or different ways to enter the data and initialize the model than we do. They can do it in a more rigorous way because they don't have the computer resource issues that we have in this country. They're running a few models on their big supercomputers. We're running dozens of models that you have to rent space and say, look, you've got so many minutes to run this, and we got to put this model on there, and then we got to put that model, and so on and so forth. We have some of the most powerful computers in the world are in meteorology, or for us, because the equations that govern the atmosphere wrap around this room. So you have to condense those equations, and then when you condense, you're creating an error, but you can't solve the full equation, so you have to condense it. So you're already starting off with an error. And even if you did solve the whole equation, after about 10 to 14, 15 days, it becomes intractable mathematically, which means I can't tell you exactly where the storm is going to be, or how hot or cold it's going to be, or what the wind speed and direction is going to be. But these convective allowing models for the thunderstorm activity, say close in, say within 24 hours, are getting better. Some are better than others depending on how they start, called a hot start or a warm start or a cold start. In other words, it's revved up, it's a hot start, so it already has its current conditions and it's already got what's going on, and then it moves from there to predict the thunderstorm an hour later. Versus a cold start says, okay, I'm starting the engine from scratch. And I've got to fire up the atmosphere and get it all going and then push forward. So those are not going to do as well in, say, the first few hours of the forecast, for example. So the thunderstorm, or what we call the convective allowing models, are getting better. They're not anywhere near perfect, not even close. But they give us an idea, too, of what we call mode of convection or mode of thunderstorms. Are they going to be in lines? Are they going to be discrete individual cells? Are they going to be rotating? Maybe more tornadic, that kind of thing. So that can be helpful for us to translate to our customers and partners and general public that, like today, we're in a marginal risk for severe weather. I'm not thrilled about it today. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, but sometimes those are the ones that kick your butt. So
To get better forecast, it's just a matter of more NextRad towers needed, or would that solve everything?
yeah, so his question is, would more NextRad or radar towers solve some of the issue? Not everything, but it would definitely help in our warning operations, because, not to scare you, but remember where that radar was in Jasper County? Versus about 70 to 75 miles away is Charleston. So as the radar is scanning on that lowest level, even at 0.5 degrees, by the time it reaches Charleston, it's 5,000 feet above the surface. Because the Earth curvature, radar's bending upwards. 5,000 feet is as low as we can see with that radar. I'm trying to get the Navy here to get their radar. They have one that's running it's running apparently, but in like research mode. And if I could get that data, then I could see all around at least the Charleston Tri-County area of what's going on lower down. So absolutely more radars, what we call gap filler radars, would be extremely helpful and would help us warn better and see things better. You can't forecast and warn what you can't see. Ever going to happen? I don't see it. Not anytime soon anyway, unless somebody at high levels values this as an issue. There were hands everywhere. Yeah.
What happens when an aerosol hits a weather balloon?
Yeah. I've often thought the same thing, and I've been what's the word? Been told by people that this airstream around things like jets and even smaller planes like Aerostars are going to take that up and around. It's hard to believe. The reason I'm having a hard time believing it is the balloon has a 70-foot long train or string between the base of the balloon and the instrument package. 70 feet. It has to be that long so that there's no interference between the dynamics around the balloon and the instrument measuring the humidity, temperature, wind speed, direction. It's hard to believe that that thing dangling around underneath doesn't get caught in a prop or a jet. I've never heard of it happening, but I can't say with a definitive answer that it would never happen. So hopefully it wouldn't.
How can you prepare for it? What happens if you're IFR in the clouds?
I don't know. You're screwed. What else to tell you?
I was just going to ask, are there any new types of data that are being incorporated into this picture? I've heard of people looking at signal strength in wireless networks like cell networks and then interpreting moisture levels throughout the space from that. And I was wondering, is that being used?
Oh, there's always new technologies out there. I mean, that one in particular I'm not necessarily aware of, but our satellites, for example, are the best in the world. And they do so much that even don't have time. We talked about different languages, right? Well, we also have we're just constantly getting new stuff thrown at us to learn. Just like a doctor, a medical doctor would, have to keep being retrained and going to seminars and stuff like that. There's all kinds of new cool technologies out there that can certainly help us and have been. Can I name them one by one? Not necessarily, but yes, that kind of thing does infiltrate its way into our operations at some point. Especially, we work closely with universities, for example, say, like an NC State or Penn State, where we actually have weather offices on their campuses. That was a big move back in the 90s in our modernization when we split off into those 122 offices to try to get better relationship with academia. And then it didn't really, there's only a few of the offices across the country that have that, but we're still very strong relationship with academia. Hiring, when we hire, we're talking to the professors, I'm talking to my graduate professors, we're getting the best. I mean, really, I'm fearful for my children, that are they ever going to be able to get a job when I see what they're competing with out there. There was another question back there.
Move on, guys.
Okay.
The basic question was hitting a balloon. I assume they're not very strong. I mean, the cable, the rope hanging down.
It's just a string. It's just a thin twine string.
Yeah, so bounce below it.
It should cut. I just, I don't, would it wrap around your prop? And I mean, I can imagine some horrible things, but
Probably instrument package reflecting that.
that might, but it is styrofoam, and it's about this big, so
How big the balloon, how high does it go?
the balloon goes over 100,000 feet, and by the time it bursts, it's probably close to the size of a school bus. Yeah.
Do you recover the packs?
We do recover the packs once in a while, not very often, but actually we just retrieved one out of somebody's tree here, which I'd never gone through that process before, but we actually do call people to, make sure that that person gets that thing out of their tree. So we will, when we get it back, we can reuse it and recondition it. But mostly we lose them out over the ocean.
Thank you, Ron. And by the way, my wife would like your cell phone number, so every time we take a trip, she can call you a week in advance of going.